Hello, welcome to the first tutorial covering animation. Now in the tutorial I'm going to focus on using Adobe After Effects, which is a composition software, but I'm also going to be looking at Flash as a footnote so that people can actually use Flash to create animations as well. Now Flash is more catered towards animation and I'll explain why. So After Effects is fully equipped for animation in a more simplistic application, whereas Flash allows you to create animations from scratch. It allows you to create frame by frame animations, and it also supports illustration. With After Effects, you'll find this out in other tutorials. In After Effects, the animations are constructed using imported images. So for example, you could create illustrations and things like that and they would work in After Effects. Okay? But After Effects is, in my opinion, and in a lot of people's opinions, a superior program. So we're going to focus on After Effects and you'll see that it has a large, broad range of applications for you. So we're going to be creating a bouncing ball just to get our heads around using After Effects for specifically animation. So start a new composition by clicking New Composition. Now at this stage you don't have to worry about this. This is resolution, this is frame rate, it doesn't necessarily matter. Okay, so I pressed OK and I'm in this new area. Now what we have is the work area. You can see where the screen ends, so you can see all of your work needs to be in this black square, or checkered square if you toggle the transparency grid, which is quite useful. Okay. Down here is the timeline. The timeline is made up of what looks like seconds at this point in time, but you can see individual frames. Okay, 1 frame, 2 frame, 3 frame. So if you were paying attention, in the other screen that was just up, I had made sure that it was 29.97 seconds. So that would mean 29.97 frames. So that would mean that 1 second would be off screen at this point in time. So 1 second would be, yes, here. So that's 1 whole second there. Can you see that? And these are all the frames that make up that first second. Okay, so nice and simple. We're going to make a ball because we're going to be making a bouncing ball. So select the ellipse tool, and drag it out. I don't necessarily want it to be white, so hopefully I'll be able to change it. Nice red ball there. Okay, and you can adjust it if you like using a different tool. Okay, so the selection tool is what you use mainly, and then you've got other tools, for example, like the ellipse tool that we just used. Okay, so how do we actually animate this? We animate this by moving down here into the layers property area. Now you have lots and lots of different properties to choose from. You can add properties if you add effects to the object. So for example, this is a shape layer. That's the circle there that makes up the shape layer. Okay, you can have multiple shapes within. That's ellipse 1 is this one in particular. Okay, but we're just going to be transforming the shape layer in its entirety. Okay, now what you need to pay attention to at this point in time is adjusting the anchor point. The anchor point is this little dot here. Okay, and it's this little dot that determines how an object is moved. I'll illustrate this. So if it's rotated, you can see that it rotates around that anchor point. Okay? Now, we don't want it to be rotating skew-width. So what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that it's set directly in the middle, so that when we rotate, and other things, when we rotate, it stays in the position it should be in. Okay? So just set your anchor point before you move forward. Now, I'll just illustrate how we create animation. So we use something called keyframes to program a selection of movements. Okay, So we'll just start by adding a keyframe. We're going to move the position. So you can see the stopwatch here. If we click the stopwatch, notice what it says here. It says toggleability of property to change over time. So that's exactly what we're doing. Click the stopwatch and we've created a little dot there, a little keyframe, okay? That little, what is it, a rhombus? Something like that. That little diamond, okay? And it sets that first position. If we move the timeline along, let's say we do it here to about 16 frames past. We move this down, you'll be able to see that you have another keyframe selected, okay? And you can see the difference there. First keyframe has the first point, the A point. The second keyframe has the B point. So you have the movement A to B, okay? Now, if we were to zoom in, you'll be able to see that the object has a trajectory, okay? You can see every single frame and where its position is on each of those different frames. The beads that sit on the line. Another thing to take interest in is the fact that you can change the trajectory as well, okay, separate to the keyframes. So we've got these little handles here that curve, okay? So you can see that you have more options to play with, okay? And the great thing about After Effects is there are a boundless amount of options available to you, okay? So what we're going to be doing is we're going to be playing around with that aspect, creating a animation of this ball bouncing. And what we're going to do is we're going to use scale and position. That's all I really need, okay? So I'll just illustrate scale. I can make it smaller. I'll illustrate position. I move it, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to try this out. And I'm going to aim to complete the bouncing ball in a second. So I'm going to have a second of movement and I'm going to try and replicate it so that it can continue on and on, a constant bouncing ball, okay? So I'll just pop that in position. That's in position. Okay, so it's only going to render, export even, the area within here, okay? So first position is down. I'm going to move along. I'm going to drop the ball, okay? And then, if I wanted to, I could just move it along and bring the ball back to where it was. So let's play that back and see what that looks like. Nice, simple bounce there, okay? What we're going to do though, is we're going to play around with this. We're going to add scale to this. So, how do we go about doing that and why are we going to be doing that? We're going to be trying to create the animation so that it is lifelike, okay? It has some verisimilitude added to it. Okay, so we're going to do that by adding scale changes. Now, I click the stopwatch for the scale and we've got that extra diamond attached. Now, we can constrain the proportions or even ignore the option to constrain proportions. So unlink that chain as the icon shows. And we're just going to squash it down and squash it out. And I'd like you to do the same. If we zoom in, we'll be able to see what's happening here. So now we have changed the ball, but we haven't added the original state as a keyframe. So we're going to just do this by typing it in instead. So I click on the number that I want to change and I change it to 100% again. Okay. Okay, so that's far too much. So I will be messing around with that. So let's try that. So say it's about 70. We'll do this one to 70 as well. Okay, so that seems fine. I might want to, on this point in time, squeeze it out a little bit more. There you go, so you do have some real squish there. And that's the type of thing that we're looking for. Okay, so I can take this, now just like you would in Word or something like that with a selected word, I can copy, Command C, Command V. Copy and paste, that's what that was. Okay? And there I have it, I've got my object there, bouncing away. Looks fairly realistic, doesn't it? Now, just to finish off, I'd like you to try doing this. Select the keyframe for the position. Now, because we haven't actually moved the ball or anything like that, we've created a new keyframe. You see how I did that? I just clicked on the diamond here, add or remove keyframe at current time. And that's what it does that. Don't need that one, so I'll just delete that. Now, I've done that with this point here, okay? So that means from this point to this point, I can actually extend that. So it looks like it takes a little while for the ball to reach the top. Just like if it was affected by gravity. So let's have a look at that again. There you go. There's a slight amount of slow as it reaches the top there. A little bit more realistic, if that's the case. Now, there are lots of effects and things like that that you can apply to your objects when you bring them into After Effects. One that I like to use an awful lot is blur effect. Anything in movement will create a blur of some sort. So let's try doing a directional blur. There are loads to choose from. Nice easy one to use is directional blur. Now you can see it's actually been brought up there at this point in time. And I can actually bring it up here as well. But try to use this if you can, because it gets quite complicated when you've got lots and lots of effects going on. If you want to clean up things, just remember that you can do this to any of the things that are in your way. That way you can keep things looking neat and uncomplicated. So let's add blur length. Let's see what it does to our shape. If I add loads, you'll be able to see it makes quite a stark difference there. Okay? I'm going to bring that all the way down to 0 again. No, we'll do it to 5. Just 5. So it's in full motion and it goes back to normal. Command C, Command V. Notice all I'm doing is selecting that one, pressing copy, and then I'm moving the marker along, Command V, and I'm adding that in there. So that's what I just did there. Okay? So what I'll do here, perhaps, I'll leave it like that. Okay. So that might be a little bit too much blur, but I'm quite greedy in that aspect. Okay, so that's something to take into account. Something else that you can do, you can add effects. Okay? I'm just going to quickly tell you how to replicate the same activity in Flash. But what we're going to do before that is I'm going to show you how to render a composition. So I'm going to composition. Whilst this is selected, you can see it's selected by the blue line. Add to render queue. Okay. Output 2. Let's just change this. Change it to the desktop. That's perfectly fine. We'll call that bounce sample. Doesn't matter what you call it. Okay. Click render. Once you've done that, and it renders it frame by frame. There you go, indicating that it's completed. Okay, so that's there. If I double click that, I'll be able to convert it, because QuickTime doesn't like to play large files, and then it will play. There you go, that's your bouncing ball animation. That's a second's worth of footage that you've created as your first task. Well done. Okay, if you have done that. Okay, so we're going to move on now, and I'm going to show you a similar aspect in Flash. So this is what you get when you first start. I'm just going to click Action Script 3.0. Now, you'll see that we've got very, very similar things going on. We've got the screen, we've got the timeline, we've got a layer already set out for us, and we've got each and every single frame. Now notice I can't move the marker. So what I need to do, now it's 24 frames per second, so I'm going to go up to this point in time. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to click Insert Frame. And this now has some freedom of movement. We've made a second's worth of frames there, okay? So I'm going to add in my ball. Nice and simple. Okay, so we've got a ball. It doesn't look like the other ball. It doesn't necessarily matter. Okay, so once I've done that, if I go back on myself, watch what this little dot does. There you go. I've undone what I've done. And there's an empty set of frames there. Command V. Oh, no, that's the wrong one. Make the ball even. Sorry, that's what I needed to do. Let's change this time. If I make the ball, it is back in there, and you can see that there's something in that area. Now, there's no tweening to take place in After Effects unless you select it to happen. So tweening is that aspect of using keyframes to make motion. That's generally the term that's used to refer to it. So create a motion tween. So this will come up. The selected item cannot be tweened. You must convert this to a symbol in order to tween. Of course I want to do that. Okay, so that symbol is now in your library. Okay, and you can use it whenever you want. Okay, so back to here. What we're going to do is we are going to make the same set of motions. So the transform options are there. We can select these so that they can always be seen. And we can start playing around. Okay, so I can move it. I can move it down. So remember, you move your marker and then you make the movement change. So I can go all the way here. I can bring it back up. Okay. So, let's try adding the scale as well. Now it's a little bit tricky because instead of After Effects, where you can see all of the different keyframes here, in Flash, you have to rely on all of the keyframes within this aspect. Okay? Okay. So, let's start. So we just need to have this selected and we can start playing around with the transformation. So these are the scale widths and heights. We unclick and constrain, and then we are going to play around with these. So it hits the bottom. So that needs to go down, that needs to go up. Now here, just like we did in the other one, let's turn this back to 100. Let's turn this back to 100. And let's do it on the other side as well. A similar aspect there. Okay, so what you can do is do the same thing that we did last time, but it just might be a lot easier in Flash to just move it slightly down. So you can see from A to B, those keyframes, it's going to be a slower amount of movement. Yeah, it's not that easy to see that, so we'll just bring that down just a little bit more. Oh no, I've done it the wrong way. So sometimes it does get confusing. Bring that back up, and it's this one I need to bring further down so it doesn't exactly reach the top. Okay, Hopefully that should work as a nice repeatable GIF. What I want you to do is export that as well if you have completed it. Export video or movie. Let's see what's what. Click animated GIF. It's repeatable. Click save. Okay, so hopefully that will work. Where did I save it to? I always forget. Anyway, that's essentially it for the tutorial. So just to recap, you've learned how to produce animations using 2 different programs by exploring the basic principles of animation